Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to the virtual showcase on reproducible research in data science. I want to give you a little bit of the background. So MIDAS organized this reproducibility challenge earlier this year with the goal of promoting the good work of our colleagues at U of M and to showcase best practices and tools that our entire community can adopt. We received many wonderful submissions from across the campus, offering many different perspectives. Today's presentation will touch on three issues: the definition of reproducibility, what should or should not be expected to be reproduced, assessing the reproducibility of others' works, and reproducible research with restricted data. So the judges have picked a number of teams to put together this virtual showcase. If you missed the previous presentations, you can go to the MIDAS website to check out the videos and slides. An online collection of resources will be coming very soon. In addition, we will host a reproducibility day on September 14th in the morning. We will announce winners of the challenge who will receive cash awards, and there will also be tutorials and panel discussions. Today's main speaker is Chris Brooks, who is an assistant professor in the School of Information here at U of M. The work was done in collaboration with Josh Gardner, who was a PhD student of computer science at the University of Washington, and Ryan Baker, an associate professor in the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania, and the director of the Penn Center for Learning Analytics. Today's presentation is on the reproducibility in research on student success, especially research with predictive modeling. The team tested the replicability of multiple prominent and published models of student success and tried to determine factors that impede reproducibility. The judges liked this entry because of its serious effort to replicate high-profile studies and coming up with reasons behind a lack of full reproducibility. In addition, there's a platform for others to replicate studies. All these are significant contributions to the field. In addition, their work is done with restricted data, in this case, the privacy issues for student data, making the work particularly valuable because reproducible research with restricted data is always a challenge. So I'd like to invite the audience to put down your questions during the talk in either the chat box or the Q&A. So now I'd like to ask Chris to share his screen and take it from here.
Thanks very much, Jing. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Maybe somebody can give me a thumbs up if they can. I'm using the setup I was trying to get together for fall. So with fall coming, I have a teleprompter and as you can see, dramatic lighting because I don't know what I'm doing yet there. So, okay, great. Thanks, Daniel. So I'm going to, yeah, this is great. I'm very much looking forward to sharing this work. As Jing mentioned, it's done by myself along with Josh Gardner, who did the majority of it while he was at the University of Michigan. He did a master's degree in applied stats and UMSI. And Ryan Baker, who's kind of well known in the field as one of the founders of the educational data mining movement. And in today's talk, I want to talk about some specific replications that we went to do. I want to talk about how that changed our thinking on what we should be doing inside of our community, which is, I'll say broadly, learning analytics, learning science, educational data science, educational data mining. There's kind of a bunch of specific communities in there, but that's the domain of interest. And then how we synergize that with our desire to help others, and that's really to build a platform. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump into it, and I don't know if I can see the chat well. but feel free to ask questions, and if I don't get, answer them in line, I will answer them, at the end. So a couple of things to maybe pick up immediately from the title of this talk and how it's stylized here on this first slide. So first, Replicate.Education is actually a URL. You can go there. There's a web page there, and that's where we've decided to chronicle our journey. I wanted to say that I'm most excited about this work with respect to the platform, and so hence the emphasis of mine on the platform and the work that we've been doing there. Okay, so broadly, just to contextualize it first, predictive models in learning analytics is really the area that we've been looking at and where most of our work has been. So the field of learning sciences, of course, is much, much broader, and there's a breadth of methods. In fact, predictive models, I would say, are actually a very small amount of what's being done there. In the world of learning analytics, now with more data, predictive models are a big part of it, but there's lots of other aspects to learning analytics, including understanding. Sense making is kind of a big piece there. So in today's talk, I'm going to talk about reproductions of work that we did of others in the field of these predictive models. I'm going to talk about how we then decided to engage our broader community. And for that, it's largely learning analytics and educational data mining. They both have conferences, both have journals, both have societies associated with them. And those have been our two primary places. And then this work that we've been doing on a platform for replication. And it's called MORF, the MOOC Replication Framework, and you'll hear more about that. So first, predictive models. So predictive models in learning analytics, I would say are, it's only a decade old where we've been using these. Now, certainly there's been a lot of work in the past about using predictive mechanisms and using analytics well before, 20, 30, 40 years back. But using the more computational approaches to building predictive models, machine learning approaches, has really only grown as we get more quantified data. So that's in the post-2005, 2010 era. More work is actually being done online, and the methods have become democratized and access to lots. Often these models are student success models, and that's a bit nebulous. So some of the tasks that actually researchers are looking at are trying to predict somebody's grade or a pass prediction. This is really the most common task. Enrollment in a subsequent course. I have a colleague down at UC Berkeley, for instance, does a lot of work with enrollment and curriculum. Degree completion, actually vendors are very interested in this, largely when they sell products to schools that have challenges getting students through the pipeline, and job outcomes. And job outcomes is really a data-starved area right now. So in the early days of computational predictive models, they're similar to a lot of other domains, right? So we see all these great techniques happening in computer science, and then we import them into health education. There's a lot of parallels actually between those because of the restricted nature of the data set, or anthropology education, et cetera. So we tend to, or in the domain, in the area, I'll say we because I'm as guilty of this as others, collect data which is actually easily accessible. So this tends to be the course that you're teaching yourself. So you can think about all the issues that might come up with that. We think about the things that might impact performance. So largely as an instructor, I would think about those things. And so there are some of the early data science work in education with predictive models wasn't as tied to educational theory as one might like. And then there's this common task of just throwing everything into a framework, so WEC or R, and then just a big shootout, I like to call it, showing which classifiers work best for half a dozen metrics. So we look at F-score, AUC, sensitivity, accuracy, and then we look at naive Bayes, C4-5, very different parameterizations of naive Bayes models, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have this giant chart of, or table of floating point numbers, we bold a few of them, and that was very common to see in papers. So these approaches, though, present a number of challenges. And now that these methods are much more commonly understood, there's an opportunity for us to level up our community. So collecting convenient data, for instance, leads to various biases and issues. Tends to be small data set. There's often an instructor effect because it's non-blind. And it actually changes often what we're teaching as well. And what we're studying. So there's a lot more of this, for instance, predictive models done on STEM and CS classes because that's where the funding is, and that's where the instructors are who know the methods are, and they're instructors / researchers. There tends to be a lack of diversity, so that can be in the student population or the subject matter. There's a great article called The Weirdest People in the World, and I think that it's a wonderful article, and it should be kind of standard reading in any social sciences data, but it's maybe it's 10, 15 years old, and it basically talks about how we study so many of our students that we know a lot of things about our students, and that's maybe not representative of the places that we actually want to impact. And honestly, there's a huge inability to share data, and that turns out to be a very critical aspect of what we end up looking at. Coming up with your own features and software has other challenges, so a lack of tie to theory, the inability of others to stand on your shoulders or to check your work, and then there's this overtraining to hidden pedagogy, things that I haven't made explicit in my modeling approach, but that's how I teach my class, and wait, doesn't everybody teach like that? I didn't think about that, right? And that stuff never gets into the 10-page ACM paper, or it's a challenge to get it in there. I'll take aim at the classifier shootout as well. So this is very misleading. There's often an overtraining effect. You'll hear me talk a lot about that. Often the classifier choice is actually divorced from real perspectives on use. So we build all of these classifiers and we're like, if you use this deep learn model on week 12, it will do very well at predicting, with these parameterizations, it'll do very well at predicting who will show up for week 13 of a class. That has a lot of problems because I'm not really sure that's a question that we can operationalize later. And when you're doing that with millions of students' data, depending on how you built that deep learn model, it might not be a computationally feasible thing to be doing. And also, in the end, the classifier shootouts, I think, have been critiqued. Andrew Ho at Harvard has, in the Grad School of Education, has critiqued them a little bit here, I think. And it's really, it comes back to this, wait, why are we trying to predict things in the first place? Usually it's to not have those things happen, to improve education. And so sometimes we have to look at that giant table and wonder, actually, are some of these things that we shouldn't have done in the first place because they're not really meaningful for our question. Okay, so our slice of context here. We decided to tackle this by focusing our context on Coursera. We're interested in much more than Coursera, but Coursera has a bunch of interesting opportunities. So first, both Penn, Dr. Baker, and Michigan here use Coursera and are early adopters of Coursera and have used it quite significantly. So just with that single platform, we have this ability to sort of pool our data and do really interesting things with it and not have to worry about the platform schema changing. We've also done a lot of work in the past with things like edX, Coursera, Future Learn, very Canvas, a big one. And there's a lot of challenges because the platforms are different and there's a tie then to the pedagogy and what does it mean for the pedagogy to be different. So I'm going to focus today's talk mostly on Coursera. This means that our population tends to be large, tends to be diverse in many different ways, but not balanced, right? We should never confuse diversity with balanced. There aren't the same number of different kinds of students, and that's from their background, their age, their geographic location, their language, but it's not a balanced sample. And it tends to be focused on informal learning opportunities. Now, that's not exclusively true, though. In fact, University of Michigan launched 2 degrees on the Coursera platform last year. So there's also a moving target aspect. So for part 1 here, I want to talk about 3 different replications that we did. And by we, I'll be honest, I mean Josh, right? Josh was the student working on these projects. So Josh Gardner wrote the code for these, interacted with these authors and really tried to build these. And Ryan and I provided that kind of context and guidance. So the first of these is by Xing and others, and it's on temporal predictions of dropouts in MOOCs. This is interesting because it was an early example of MOOC prediction models. They made an innovative claim about the benefits of stacking as an ensembling approach. They used a system not known for MOOCs, Canvas. Now, Canvas is known really well inside of higher ed, especially now. This was 2016, I think, so maybe not as well known. Interestingly, one of the authors is employed at Canvas. They used a single course of limited size, so that's quite different from many of the MOOCs things that we would see now. And this is actually fairly highly cited. Google Scholar yesterday was 169. So digging into this a little bit. So there's some considerations with this. They do all of the prediction in this post hoc manner, where predictive models' performance is evaluated on new data from the same course that they use training data to pull from. So this is a side effect of small n's and convenient data sampling. It goes hand in hand often. It's a recipe for overtraining. And this is frankly is a personal pet peeve of mine. And in kind of my early work in the 2015 in this area in the field, I really wanted to try and level up the field to start moving away from this because I believed, that's a key word, believed, that it created overtrained models and would hamper adoption of models when we actually wanted to change education. In the work, there's also no statistical comparison between the models, so it's just kind of the mean accuracy or the accuracy of the different models they built, and we'll pick the one that's at the top. And there's actually really many different model comparisons being done. So all of these were and continue to be common practice in the domain field, in the field of learning analytics and the learning sciences. There are actually 2 specific claims in the paper we aim to replicate. So F1 is a stacked ensemble of Bayesian network and decision tree classifiers perform better than either used alone. So what this is really trying to answer is what kind of learning method should we be using? That's the contribution they claimed. The other was appended features perform better with greater stability, so less variability over weeks than week only or summed features. So how should we be thinking about feature engineering in these time series data?
Chris,
Yeah.
Can I interrupt for a second? Your voice fades in and out. Yeah, kind of sporadically. So maybe adjusting speaker position or something.
I have no idea. I'm using a webcam mic. Is this any better?
No.
No. Okay. So let's see, what else can I do? Let me see if I can just tweak a Zoom setting here.
You sound much better now.
Yeah, but I didn't do many things. So
oh,
that's a recipe for a challenge, I think, down the road. I have to apologize. I'm a Linux user and I bricked my Linux machine updating 2 days ago, so I'm on Windows. So hopefully this will work better. Just give me a moment to set this up here. And if not, we can switch to phone audio. How's that sounding?
sounds better. Much better.
Right.
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Give it a wing. My apologies, everybody.
Remember to share your slides again.
Yes. Okay, so thanks very much for getting me to fix the audio. Hopefully this works. It's just another webcam. So Right. They made two, I guess what I really just wanted to say here is they had two very specific claims, but they were trying to answer or give us evidence towards more general questions that we have in education. So there were a number of features that they wanted us to predict, or that they used, sorry, in their predictions. So dropout, a number of discussion posts, number of forum views. You could sort of imagine why these features would be predictive of whether somebody is going to drop out or continue in a course or not. They wanted to use some Bayesian methods to do this. So it turns out some of these are actually really tough. So I want to point down to this bottom one, social network degree. That's actually really common, but how do you form the social network? And what do you mean by the degree? So how do we operationalize this nice little table that they gave us in the paper? And it would have been a lot easier if we had this on the right, the source code. Now, what parameters, for instance, are we using for the Bayesian network? This is actually a huge problem with a lot of replication machine learning research, is that we don't know the parameterizations of the model. So in these giant charts that we get that are these shootouts, comparison of methods, really there's a lot of parameterization that goes on that's important. And sometimes that's even, learning methods are being used for that. And so we were left with a lack of information to be able to just go ahead and replicate this. And most frustrating about this work and the work trying to do replication here is that we had no cooperation from the authors. Oh, I saw a chat message come up. My audio drop out again. Oh, anyway, I'm going to hope that it's all okay. Right, so our process, we engage in what's called a good faith replication and open science practices ourselves, right? So let's try and be models. So there's this excellent paper, The Replication Recipe, What Makes for a Convincing Replication. So we stood on the shoulders of our colleagues over in social psychology with experimental replications. And we used large MOOC data. So we used, 28 courses. That's a total of 133 sessions. So you can think of a session as an individual offering of the course. Over 500,000 active students, 14 million clickstream events. So big data. And only 2 institutions, but still 2 different institutions. So the results, you can look in our papers. I'll just skim through these, but in short, the original results replicated significantly only on 2 of the 6 comparisons, and in the remaining 4 comparisons, the opposite results replicated significantly. So actually, the claims were quite out of line with what we saw in our data set. Which was much larger and more diverse.
Chris,
yeah.
just so you know it's happening again, I'm not sure there's much you can do, and also, given time, we probably can't really use much time to troubleshoot. So I just want to let all the audience members know that afterwards, the video will be online, and hopefully we will get some sort of a transcript.
Yeah.
Just so that whatever you missed during the live presentation will be made up later. Right? Sorry about this.
Yeah, apologies. So I'll just go ahead and, if people have questions, please do reach out to me, and I can, Jing, I can actually can some audio later as well for things to go up online. So with F2, the devil is kind of in the details. So F2 considered the performance and stability of the feature engineering model that was being used. So we found that the feature comparison was actually quite questionable. They didn't do one comparison, which was actually important because it was basically, and certainly within statistical confidence, the same as their chosen model. And what it really came down to is that the ensemble seemed to mostly exploit one learner in particular, the C4.5 learner. So for our second replication, this was a by Fay and Young. It was also a temporal model for predicting student dropout. So we were still trying to predict the same kind of achievement, slightly different. Also very highly cited, compared several statistical algorithms that they used 2 courses and the same sort of ad hoc approach. But the big difference was that the authors were eager to help. And so then we ran into this question of, okay, so can we see your code? And they said, well, we don't really have the code for that anymore. And even if we did, a lot has changed. So there's a lot of nuance here. It's not quite as simple as please use version control. Deep learning evolved a lot from when they first started to 3 years later when we were trying to replicate. And so how do we capture this whole execution environment? And does it matter? And so this is almost a philosophical issue. If a tree fails to replicate in the forest and no one sees it, does it matter? And I was thinking about this yesterday, and there's actually this wonderful grove of trees close to where I grew up in Saskatchewan called the Crooked Trees. And these are aspen trees. The beauty of aspen trees is actually they're not individual trees, they're all connected. They're all clones of one another. So they are replicants of one another. And what makes this interesting is because they all replicate in this crooked way, they've actually been studied a lot, and it turns out they have a genetic mutation. And so if there was one tree in a forest that happened to be crooked, it would be unremarkable. But when the whole forest becomes crooked, it becomes remarkable and it becomes important to be able to dive into. And I think that that's actually a little bit of a philosophical question for us with replication. There's a file drawer effect. When something doesn't replicate, you just stick it in the drawer and you're like, well, guess it didn't work in my context. And that's why we talk about learning styles still, you know, years after the term has largely been discredited at having something in that has replicability. And it's because the idea and the philosophy sounds good, but we tend to lack that ability to come back and look and really study it as a science. Okay, so we slogged on. We engaged in good faith replication with them. The original paper compared 6 models over 5 weeks of 2 MOOCs using 3 dropout definitions. We looked only at one definition of dropout. I put this here just so that you could see what the features are kind of similar. Did people view a lecture? Did they download the lecture? Did they look at a quiz? But at the end, we wanted to predict a binary label. Will they have activity in the final week? And there's actually some good thought to their modeling technique here in using deep learn and recurrent models, given that it's a temporal aspect. So one of the challenges, though, is that their original study design didn't even cross-fold data. And I had a lot of troubles with replicating it as is because that's an experimental error. That was a methodological error, I thought, was being made. And so we wanted to tweak that a little bit. So first, we looked at their original results, that's on the left, and then our results on the right. You'll note that we limited the number of models we looked at. We took out the HMM models. That's because they used something novel and didn't have the source code for that anymore and said, well, they didn't perform well anyway, so let's just get rid of them. You'll notice that the blue line in theirs is towards the bottom of that pack of 4, and that's the vanilla RNN model, and in ours, it's on the top. And so just with cross-validation, we found the accuracies dropped, as one might expect, but we also found that there was quite an ordering difference in their results. And so then we fixed and played with the methodology a little bit more. Cross-validation actually isn't a very good approach, so we instead wanted to test on a future course, and we found that the accuracy dropped even more, but the ordering stayed the same. So that was interesting. So replication in an infrastructure gave us an opportunity to look more at how models might be productionized. What's really important, and I'll point you to the paper here, is that there were statistically significant differences between the orderings of the models, and that we were able to show that the model that they had chosen as the winner was not the winner when we did it with our much larger data set. Okay, so the third replication is kind of a little bit of a lie. It's only kind of a replication, and there's a lot of nuance to the word of replication, and I'm using it broadly here. We wanted to go back to the Xing model and use a new lens, fairness, and look at the work of Xing through that lens. So remember, we didn't have the cooperation of Xing at all. So we built our own code and open sourced it, and now we want to encourage people to write comparisons against us, and so that really started with us. So we're going to apply a new metric, fairness, on the established method that's well known using our code base, which is free on GitHub. So the approach we took is through a slicing analysis where we look at different groups by demographics is what we were looking at, and how models compare for those groups. And because this didn't already exist as a method or a package, we created it, added it to CRAN, and now it's being used in other domains. It's being used in education, it's being used in medicine as well. And so that was heartening to see. So the big lesson learned, open science, open source for the win here, made us very happy. And in the end, we got a LAC best paper to boot out of this. So what this allowed us to do was to make new claims on established methods. So for instance, the C4.5, the decision trees and the Bayesian models from Xing, we were able to look at them through this new lens of fairness. And so we were able to see, for instance, here the CART model, the mean fairness was 0.7, and in the sorry, that's the mean AUC. The fairness, this is our metric, ABROCA. You could see that the level of difference in fairness is different between these two, and we have confidence intervals at all. Really what this metric, I can't really jump into it here, but looks at the difference between two ROC curves. So it's that gray shaded area there, that kind of, that region is the amount of the region where fairness was different for the two populations. So what it actually lets us do, though, is actually we can start to look at models through another lens, and these are established methods of others. So I've zoomed in here on two models on a particular sensitivity and specificity for those models, or false positives, and here we actually see in the one model, one group is preferred. So it's unfair with respect to the blue group, and I think blue here, I'll be honest, I can't read this legend, but I think it's, you know, one is males, but the other one for the same region actually prefers the other group. And that brings up lots of interesting thoughts with respect to the instrument we were interested in, which was fairness. But it also means that we can add our own models, and now we can compare our own modeling techniques to the ones that whoever they is, have been using. So we looked at an LSTM or a logistic regression or an SVM, and we're able to compare these with the other models and the amount of fairness in those models. So we're able to take a new method, a metric, that we're interested in, fairness, and new modeling approaches, and compare them with the old ones. And then we did one more thing. We tried to generalize. And so this really struck me as like, is this a question, or is this just like a humble brag that we had a big N? And I actually think that that's the goal of replication, is often to generalize, to find a truth and to verify that it is a truth and not unique to that individual circumstance. And that's why big data sets like the ones that we've been talking about are important. Okay, so that was part 1 of 3. Part 2 is much faster, and so is part 3. So hopefully I'll end close to on time, and thanks for sticking with me here. Here's some papers of the previous replication work. So part 2 is how do we engage a community? So in the community of learning analytics and educational data science, we have cognitive psychologists, we have educational researchers broadly. You can think of this as like colleges of education or teachers' colleges. We have computer scientists, a fair number. We have STEM educators, a fair number in there as well. And a lot of interdisciplinary folks who are interested in understanding learning through data. So we started, you know, as we were doing some of these replications, we decided that we wanted to start a clearinghouse, a place where we could show off our replications and hopefully get other people to show off their replications to encourage the field to do replications. And so this is REPLICATE.EDUCATION. We also ran 2 workshops, a workshop at the EDM conference in 18 and the LAC conference in 18. And these were both well attended and there was a lot of energy. And since then, I've been in contact with a number of people at the workshops who have actually gone on to do replications or other things that are similar to replications. Now, our replications are all post-hoc data science-based replications, but others are doing experimental replications where they recruit and do things like mini classes from Ben Mott's, for instance, where they recruit and are replicating in large scale across multiple different universities. So this was an important part of us trying to level up our disciplinary field, which isn't, you know, going through that quite the same level of soul searching that psychology was. But I actually have a lot of concerns here as well, because there seems to be like a push. A lot of people jump in and say, yes, this is good, we should do this. And then it kind of peters out. And I saw this in the HCI community. In the human-computer interaction community, there were conferences with workshops, and the workshop at CHI was called Replika. It was great. And it went for a couple of years and then petered out. And it seems like novelty becomes the big thing. And that seems to be the place where we know we can get publications from and seems to attract more people intellectually to than replication. And that's something I think that we need to do, to look at as people who believe in replication as an important part of science and progress. How do we get it funded? How do we support it? And so forth. Okay, part 3. So part 3, I'll also be relatively brief at. So part 3 is actually, part of this was the platform called MORF. And I've pointed here to an archive paper on this. So that Josh wrote on kind of an overview of MORF and the architecture we built. I think it's interesting actually that this is up on archive, given that it's about open data, open science, replication, and so forth, and that it's important that we support those as places to put evidence and work as well. So we had an audacious goal to enable big data reproducibility in MOOC research. So how big is, just to put this in context, and these numbers are well over a year old, with just Michigan and Penn, we had 209 different sessions, and that's in 77 courses with almost 1 million active students and clickstream data of almost 30 million. Huge educational data, which is quite exciting to be able to work with. Our approach is different than others in this area. And here's a few, and this is just cribbed right from the paper. You can go read it. In particular, there's not a focus on open data. So in our experiences, this won't really scale in education. Often the good bits get redacted. So discussion forum are a great example. If you start redacting a bunch of sensitive information that might identify people in a discussion forum, you might actually be changing that in a meaningful way. K-anonymization. This was an early technique used in edX by MIT, where we just looked for a certain number of users, and if that looked the same, and if those users were less than some number K, let's say there was less than 5 of them, then we would strip them from the data. But actually, that's the long tail. That's an interesting bit, and that has huge implications for bias. Another popular technique to use, especially in medical fields, is imputing some noise, right? So trying to make some sample data that has various characteristics of the data set that others can use. This actually has, I think, a lot of promise, but there's also a lot of challenges with it. In particular, if you already know all of the distributions of all of the aspects of the data, then actually, do you have many questions still about the data? So part of building the models is to understand that aspect of the data. Anyway, with MORF, we really took this approach of execute against. You give us your code and we'll execute it. And this has a number of intriguing properties. And really, it's a great example of what computer scientists would refer to as eating our own dog food. We did not build MORF after we did all of these replications, nor did we build MORF before we did all of the replications, but it was an involving project. We did the first replication with Xing, as well as some of our own predictive models, and thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And so it represents our growth as researchers trying to do replications in order to build this platform. I'll just briefly touch on, there were 3 themes of the MORF platform. Technical, we use Docker containerization, which has a lot of opportunities with it. So we want to enable technical replication. Methodological replication, so we want to level up the community with statistical validity, a lot of good built-in defaults, experimental designs, which reflect actually real-world use cases. So you can't kind of p-hack what does dropout mean to me based on my data and keep searching for things. We can define those as to what's meaningful. And then data. So because we have this large platform, we wanted to really be able to leverage a single vendor schema. So we can say the context is always going to be these Coursera courses. And we're going to focus our diversity on the students and the subjects being taught in that context. Architecture analyses are submitted to us as Docker files. This encapsulates the method, the code, and the dependencies. We then provide a software as a service implementation of MORF, which does all the training and testing of models. We use a lightweight file-based contract for communication. Jobs are sandbox, so we don't have to worry about leaking data, either sensitive student data or in the p-hacking sense, leaking information about how your models are performing. And when we return results, we stamp them with a DOI, so you can cite that and other people can look at it. So this whole platform is currently highly tuned to our predictive modeling task, dropout in MOOCs. If you're not doing dropout in MOOCs, the platform, which includes our data, doesn't work well for you right now. But we do have this broader vision of a federated, socio-technical, and open in the code and science sense platform that is built off of this, that uses containerization to encapsulate a number of things, that allows a number of different institutions, so Michigan, Penn, and others, to collaboratively provide their data without actually having to move that data and deal with kind of large interinstitutional agreements, and even allows for some opportunities for the general public to interact with some of that data. Okay, so that was a quick summary. I don't know how much you've been actually able to hear, hopefully some of it. It could be that the room is empty now, but broadly, we've been looking at replication through the lens of these individual replication reports. So I shared those 3, how we'll engage a domain or a discipline and build community, and software and platforms to enable ourselves and others. And that's all I've got for you. And Jing, as I mentioned, I can record some audio for you later if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks so much. We'll also try to tweak the audio in the recording and see if it works. But thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, but also for the very thoughtful and the thorough work. I would like to invite the audience members to ask questions. You can put your questions in chat or in Q&A, or just unmute yourself and speak up. So. Yeah. Okay, while we wait for the audience members to ask questions, let me ask you a couple questions that are actually related to how you ended your presentation. And one is for collaborators. So when people hear about the word predictive modeling and restricted data, right, a lot of things come to mind. And one major thing is medical research, right? So, and the reason that MIDAS was trying to build this reproducibility resource is exactly that we're hoping to help find approaches that can be used across domains, right? Instead of each research field working on its own reproducibility issues. So my first question to you is, how generalizable you think your approach and your platform is to other types of research?
I think it's very generalizable, and in reflection, I've talked to others who are doing similar kinds of things. So I think that there's a huge opportunity to collaborate and to build such a platform. So for instance, one data set we have here at the University of Michigan is Wi-Fi data. Very sensitive, right? It tracks people and their movements essentially through their devices. And in talking with our IT group, they were looking at trying to make that available to researchers. There's a lot of great questions, especially in the world of COVID, that we can be asking with that kind of data on the health side alone. And there's also some great questions we can ask on the education side, and we're doing that. But the architecture they were looking at was actually very similar. The idea that you can use Docker, containerize things, ingest them, and run them. And so in doing this, we've actually learned some of the downsides, some of the things that this kind of platform doesn't help with. So the big one is actually exploratory data analysis. If you just want to get to know the data, find out what kinds of questions you should be asking, and just kind of browse, that doesn't help you because you don't get that interactive session with the data. It's all built around I know what the schema is and I know what my question is, I just need more data. And so there's a huge opportunity there to bring in imputation to give sample data sets, if you will, or different levels of data access to people. I think the other thing that we've learned is that there's questions that our platform doesn't help people answer, but they still need access to that kind of data. And so one of the things we've been talking about is a sort of a hierarchy model to access the data. So if you need to get access to the raw data, then you need to sign a vetted institutional agreement. If you need to use the system, then maybe there's a template and you have to provide an IRB, you fill out the template, and then you get access to upload your analyses to the system, and it just runs. If you're only looking for a couple of data items and a couple of reports, maybe it's just a click through EULA. So there's a lot of kind of opportunities, I think, there. Our platform, recently we had a colleague reach out to us and talk about using our platform for Canvas data for the same sort of thing, and to be able to extend it to use with the Canvas data. Really, that's very doable, I think. And certainly with the way we're moving with cloud services, it also makes it very easy to do. And the platform's completely open source and on our GitHub.
All right, thanks. Let's see. Yeah, you've I think the Q&A is more comment than the question. Great work, Chris. I like how you're aware of the limitations. Thank you for your leadership in this field. So let me
That's actually a colleague, Neil Heffernan. And so let me share actually some interesting comparisons with what we've done and the great work they've done with their assessments platform. So their platform called Assessments is for math for middle school to high school, I believe. And one of the interesting opportunities there is because it's used in so many different schools, they have that same opportunity they have a standard schema. So if you want to do a study or a comparison of data with assessments, you all of a sudden have this big data set and you have to reach out to Neil and work with his team, and it's very easy, and you can start to do great things with that big data set. And that's something we leveraged as well with the Coursera data. One of the challenges is now it makes the comparison between those platforms difficult, right? You have to kind of work with multiple systems. And one of the open questions that I have is how much does the platform impact the pedagogy, psychology, or the thing that we're trying to observe? So in this case, dropout. Are dropout rates different between Coursera, Canvas, Assessments, and edX? And if so, is it the platform itself that's doing that? And how do we discover those lessons? And that's something I don't think MORF right now helps us with, but we're interested in exploring. Because the more platforms change quickly now, and the more a platform changes, and the more vendor agreements that we have with education, where we're not building it ourselves inside of higher ed, but we're using other people's software. Let's just take video conferencing, right? Now we're using Zoom. A year ago, it would have been Blue Jeans or Hangouts. And do these systems afford different kinds of interactions? And if so, can we say anything actually without the context of the platform about video conferencing, or is it always within the context of the platform? And so anyway, that's an interesting issue that comes up when we're looking inside of a single platform, which MORF does.
Okay, so I don't see yet more questions. So let me ask you another question. Actually, let me give a shout out to our next showcase, which is exactly 3 weeks from today, by Tom Valley, a researcher in the medical school, and his presentation will be about a very creative way actually to do a code verification and code release. So you guys mentioned, you know, how difficult it could be to get the code from the original authors. So I thought that presentation could be interesting to some of the audience members here today. But also before we go, I want to ask you another question, which is also what you mentioned at the end about funding. You know, replicating other people's work, right? It's important, but it's very hard to find the time and the funding to actually do it. So I wonder how you guys did this work and what kind of advice you have for others to, you know, to find the effort to do this.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm not sure that I will have the best solution there. It was a labor of love, right? A desire to learn methods, to critically examine the work that was being done in the field. So every time there's kind of a disruptive factor, like MOOCs, for instance, or COVID in the health, there will be a lot of people moving very quickly. And so we see now what some of the challenges the medical field is having with that, with treatments, size of trials, et cetera. And they have very well established ideas as to what is excellence in those. Whereas in education, the bar for what is excellence is actually very fuzzy. And so one of the challenges for me in building some predictive models was actually people were starting to ask me, well, is it better than somebody else's? And I would say, well, it's different. And then it started to bug me, right? Like, well, I should be able to answer whether it's better or not. In the field of education, we have this What Works Clearinghouse, which are things the IES has identified as things that we know to be true about educational interventions. It's stunningly bare. And I think that the way to get us there is to sort of demystify and to do these replications. Now, I'm hopeful that they will fund then those kinds of replications. And I believe that they're moving up towards that. And certainly for us, with the idea for this platform, we're really interested in some of the cyber infrastructure funding from NSF. And, you know, the key is to be able to align the goals we have with building out a platform and connecting in the people who want to be able to use that platform to do the replications. So we didn't want to be the only ones doing replications, and that's why we decided to invest in the dog food and start to use our own dog food. It worked out, we've had other people use it as a platform, and certainly been using this Abroca metric. And I think that That's going to continue to be our push. I'm a little worried that if we start to critique in conferences people's predictive modeling work, they'll actually just move away from predictive modeling and go back to teaching based on the gut or individual philosophies. And as a computer scientist in the field of education, I think that there's a lot that we can quantify here. And part of it is we just have to decide what doors we want to close first. Work with a single platform, work in a single set of domains, narrow that, and then try and make the case and engage in some of the funding. Now, the work that was funded, that we had funded for this, was actually funded in part by MIDAS, our holistic modeling of education grant that we got with Stephanie Teasley and others several years ago. And so that was part of it. Part of it was funded, out of faculty startup and so forth as well. And like I said, finding a talented student who's willing to put in effort in a labor of love, of course, makes every faculty member's job much easier.
Yeah, okay. So one more question from Daniel. Regarding reproduction implication, how much statistical difference would have actual differences in students' learning?
Right. So I don't know, because we didn't measure learning. And that's interesting. That's different than a lot of the papers that you would see at an education conference. Here, we're just measuring the modeling of whether somebody will drop out or not. We haven't even looked at what the intervention is if we can predict that they will drop out. And that's one of the challenges in bringing really quant methods into education, is so much of education's history is all on the pedagogies and the interventions and not the detections. So it's all on the treatments that we would give people and not the methods that we would use to find the cancers or to find the people who need to be treated. And so because of that, a lot of this work would actually need to be followed up now with experimental designs. That's something that Ben Motz Indiana is doing, and that's actually another great feature of the assessments platform, is that you can actually, or e-trials, pardon me, but it works with assessments as the tool, is that you can actually engage in experiments across multiple courses. So all of our work thus far, one of the pieces that we hived off was automating interventions was very difficult in the Coursera landscape. And so we just cut that off and instead focused only on that prediction piece. So it might be surprising, but our work is actually fairly concentrated, even though there's lots to predictive modelings. It's not experimental in the running new experiments, and it's not about interventions.
Okay, yeah, I think we're out of time, so let's just end the presentation here. And thank you again so much, and also thank you, Josh and Ryan, for the wonderful work. All right,
and thank you and MIDAS for running this reproducibility challenge. Like, I think it's important, and it's been really good to see the online presence of the previous webinars and the diversity of what people tackled for this challenge in both domain and topic of what part of reproducibility. And I think we need more of that, and we need to advocate for that from funders like the NSF, certainly.